It's lively, it's unrehearsed. We welcome you back into another episode of Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're alongside this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. As always, there's a distinguished panel standing by. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Reverend Daniel Corrie Shull, Burnett Avenue Baptist Church. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. Our first topic on this edition of our program, she was Queen of England for 70 years, and Monday, Queen Elizabeth II will be laid to rest. The death of the longest-serving monarch in British history means her 73-year-old son, Charles, is now king. Turning to our panel, let's hear your thoughts on the legacy of Queen Elizabeth and Britain's future with King Charles.
I think that the Queen has given an incredible legacy, moving as she has with the direction of the Commonwealth. And the image that comes to mind to me over and over again is from her Jubilee, with the Queen taking tea with Paddington Bear. I love it. Said it all. But let me go in another direction for just a moment. And this is about the heir, about King Charles III. When I heard that the mourning period prior to the funeral was going to be 10 days, I was aghast. No family deserves that for 10 days. And especially under the constant scrutiny of the camera and the microphone. A couple of days ago, Prince Charles was signing a guest book somewhere. I could have been Belfast, I'm not sure. And for whatever reason, something went wrong, and King Charles III had a total and complete meltdown on, I'm not going to say national television, I'm going to say international media all at the same time. The guy just had a meltdown. Well, he may be King of England, but he's not superhuman. In addition to taking over the reins of power, he was mourning for his mother. And it was there for everyone to see. And of course, after the meltdown, all of the pundits came back and talked about it and talked about him. That's obscene. The woman has died. She should be buried and respected, and her memory should be a blessing.
I think she represents more than we even acknowledge or understand. Of course, she performed ceremonial functions. There was something about the decorum, the way in which she carried herself and carried her responsibility, that because she wasn't political, gave the country to rise above whatever was going on in the political arena. There's something about that I really like. And I think nobody did it better than she did it. I feel for Charles. If you watch The Crown, he was not portrayed very well at all. And so there is all this negative baggage that he's carrying with him. But I think that the hope is that it will be better than anybody expects. But there was such reverence for this woman who did so much. Now, when we talk about her role as with the Church of England, I think that's a whole other thing in her religious capacity. But whatever the responsibility was placed upon her, she did it well. The people appreciate her. And I think the time period, Stan, gives the people more of a chance to mourn than just the family. Yes, the family is on display, but it gives them more of an opportunity to be able to be a part of the ceremonial functions for which she did so well.
What strikes me the most is on the televisions now, you see a lot of these life stories of Elizabeth, etc. And I see her as a good example of a leader. It's a parliamentary monarchy, so it's not. Doesn't have the authority of the kings of old, King George, and all that we revolted against. But she seems to be able to accept what is going on and adapt her own responsibility towards that and begin to see something futuristic good for the people. The one that strikes me, the image is, if you may have seen, some of you may have seen that during the World War II, of course, the kids during the bombing of London, whatever, a lot of the kids were rushed north out of harm's way, but she and her sister stayed there in London, at the palace and whatever. And there was one scene in which she and her younger sister, I think she was about 12, her younger sister was a few years younger. But basically they broadcast a radio message to the kids. And they were saying, basically, this is not, there's better things coming down the road. There are better things happening. And for someone who's in her 20s, whatever, to take on the responsibility she did, I mean, I just find it fascinating that she was able to adapt. And in her administration, to use that terminology, even though it's, again, parliamentary system, she was able to move the monarchy as the country was moving through a lot of give and takes in history, too, where the empire began to wane even further than it was before. And now with all the commonwealths, et cetera, but even some of those now are beginning to withdraw. But she was able to weather all that and still be an inspiration to the people. So I think we should, yes, acknowledge the gifts you had. We don't go much into monarchies, but she's just edging a little bit more towards democracy, whatever. But even our democracy in this country now is kind of questionable at times. And the family, talking about King Charles or Prince Charles, whatever, it's kind of like how do you want to say, a soap opera in the family with all the joys there, but all the different terrible things that have happened, all the accusations and whatever have gone on. But we have that in our country too. Look at our own past presidents and whatever, and all going back on both sides of the aisle, the scandals that were involved, et cetera. So, but in the midst of all that going on, I really respected her because she even maintained in the midst of all that, it seemed, a coolness about the country first, the children, the people, and she tried to do the best that she can. To me, that's a good sign of ministry. We can do that. So
I think that the Queen and the royal family are fascinating. I too was a devout follower of the crown, and I am anxiously awaiting what they're going to do with the next season. I think in real life, the decorum, the tradition, the ways that the constitutional reality of the United Kingdom combines with its democratic aspirations and how that is sort of bathed in these historic religious traditions. Of course, the Church of England with all of its exalted language and all of its grandiloquence and the beautiful ways that it carries out its public witness. And then there's the Church of Scotland, the Presbyterians, who we saw on display Monday in such a moving service of thanksgiving for the Queen. And I just love to see all of that on display. I've been mesmerized by the royal family since I was a child, their decorum, their dignity, their elegance. I am also equally intrigued by the conversations that are really enrapturing the globe related to independence movements and the conversation concerning reparations for all of the wealth that the royal family, the British, and the United Kingdom has been guilty of plundering from nations across the world. The British colonized over half of the world. And many places continue to be plundered, oppressed, and exploited by the British, whose face is the royal family. I think as we mourn the Queen's death and her image of stability for the nation, she is the globe's longest serving monarch. And in many ways, the entire globe has looked to her, especially in the past 30, 40 years, as a queenly grandmother that has, in some ways, soothed and stabilized the world, especially in moments of global atrocity and tragedy. But I am hopeful that in this moment of transition, that the royal family, that the British and their hierarchy would begin to really consider what it means to make historic injustices right, which they cannot entirely do. But there is a way, I believe, to help level the playing field for those countries that have been crippled, some for centuries, by the actions of the royal family, and then later the United Kingdom and its democracy. The wealth of the royal family is pretty extreme. I don't know, it's not Jeff Bezos wealthy, but they have a lot of wealth, and I've seen that their land holdings is estimated to be in the dozens of billions of dollars. I just wonder how $1 billion in a place like the Bahamas might go a long way into repairing infrastructure, may go a long way in increasing educational opportunities in the Bahamas for indigenous people who still live there and who have, in many ways, a strange and a polluted allegiance to the crown. They love too its beauty, but they live under its terror. And so while it's been very fascinating to see these days of mourning as the world has, I guess, lost a leader who in some eyes would consider to be great, I can't help but to be sorrowful for the decline of dignity and decorum in our age, but also to be alerted to the ways in which the royal family has given cover and really affirmation to the practice of white supremacy across the globe and how it continues to plunder people's natural resources and the thrivings of indigenous communities. Even the I guess iconography that has been included, such as the chariots that have been ridden throughout the streets of the United Kingdom. If you look at the pictures on them, it's interesting to see how the Black bodies are often trodden over on those images. And these images of white supremacy, of white bodies standing literally on top of naked Black bodies, or with naked Black bodies holding out trays in an image of servitude. I wish the Queen had have done more to help make some of those things right. And I stand in the hope that King Charles, who we've called Prince Charles for the last 70 years, hopefully that he will begin to use his purchase privilege and his tremendous access to begin to make life better for indigenous people across the globe.
Our son, who is military has said, so many of the globe's problems have come from the colonization of the world and what that has done globally has still continues to have such an impact everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And you know, and America has a really interesting tie. I mean, Great Britain is America's mother. And we learned colonization and oppression and domination and exploitation from Great Britain. We fought for independence from the British only to become like them. And so in the same ways that the British Empire dominated and colonized so many places in the world, America has been her most successful child. And we have our own injustices and oppression and history of exploitation that we're struggling to get rid of. It's interesting, though, how the cries for reparation continue to be unheard. Like in the case of the United Kingdom, reparations is a very easy thing to imagine, especially with colonization still happening, exploitation still happening. When you go to the countries that are owned by the British, the poverty, the lack of infrastructure, the health crises in those places is really astounding and is beneath what we would expect of any modern civilization. But yet those injustices still persist, but yet there is not a robust conversation about making those wrongs right. And I think that the royal family and the United Kingdom's democracy and their administrative officials have an opportunity to do some good and to make the 21st century much better than the last 5 centuries.
I'm optimistic about King Charles because, you know, the mantra is the royal family must be apolitical, but King Charles, when he was Prince Charles, diverted away from this with overridden vocal concerns about things like the climate change issue and other issues, in fact, affecting all humanity. And I'm hoping that he will be able to use not a bully pulpit, but a bully throne to improve the world. And also, I understand what you're saying with reparations, Corrie, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. What doesn't make sense is that all of the wealth of the British royal family is absolutely, completely untaxed wealth. Wow.
That is certainly something. We're well underway in our program, Moral Side of the News, this week. We'll move on to our second topic now, panel. Louisville's homicide count has hit triple digits again for the third straight year. In the span of just 3 days last week, shootings across the city left 6 dead. Activist Christopher Tuack said, quote, "It has never been like this. This is so widespread," end of quote. So panel, turning to you, this is a recurring topic for us. Is there a solution?
That's probably the only gun owner here on the panel. There is a solution. I've said it before. Well, first off, I would say those who own firearms, long barrel, short barrel, whatever, are responsible gun owners. And like a lot of issues, not just in moral issues, it takes a handful of, I refer to them as idiots, to basically endanger any kind of right that the responsible individuals might have. bottom line for me, John, for the panel here, as I said it before, I think we really need to re-examine the constitutional amendment and Second Amendment to see what it really means. People can say, well, it really means this, and the courts have not said that. What the courts have said, the courts have said. And the way our constitutional law works is I think we really need to re-examine, to put it before the people in the elections to see whether or not the people are behind as it is interpreted now or a new interpretation voted in. But if they do vote it as it is now, then we are, in a sense, by law, this is the way it is. And we have to look at the responsibilities and the consequences of that law. But I'm getting rid of a lot of my firearms now, not just because I don't like firearms, because I think they're works of art at times. But at the same time, as again, I use most of mine for hunting, and I'm getting a little too gray in the, long in the tooth, as they say, to get up on a cold winter morning when that bed is so warm. So I'm trying basically to realize, as I think Queen Elizabeth did, the reality is what's happening in my life. So. But I think the bottom line, John, as long as the Second Amendment is bantered about, and the Supreme Court, as I understand it, has at least ruled 4 separate times that it says it is what it says it is. And recently, in the 1980s, the last one, I think it is. I think we really need to re-examine that. And those who want to oppose, I'm first one to say there are too many guns out there and too many guns in the hands of people who don't know, should not have those guns. But I don't think it's the bottom line is to take away all firearms in this country. We're different from Great Britain. We're different from Australia. We have constitutional right, as it's interpreted now, to own such. But anyway, bottom line, I'll keep my mouth shut, is I think we need to re-examine the Constitution.
I don't think you're the only gun owner on the panel, Tony. Though I will confess that, when I've tried to fire a gun, smoke comes out and fire comes out and it's loud. And so I drop the gun and I go the opposite direction. I'm just not that kind of person. I do believe, though, that most of the people who have guns are responsible. They do want stricter regulations to make sure that guns are not in the hands of the wrong people, or people who will use them in a wrong way, because I think that most of the people who have guns have a deep respect for what they can do. And they understand that there needs to be regulation. And somehow we've developed this fascination and this love of this weapon that can be so destructive. And what we're seeing with children is that is one of the leading causes of death for children in the US, which that's just a horrible thing.
I think that the control over who gets to have weapons and so on and so forth, you can't just go in and buy a weapon. And especially, I'm not talking about the hunting rifles. I'm talking about the assault weapons. It's to have those as readily available as they are and causing the death and destruction that they do. That's where things need to be under control.
Stand not to, again, get on the bandwagon again, but the term assault weapon is one of those terms that the definition varies from person to person. If you remember, and we under Mr. Obama, I think it was, we had a gun control rule and law, but it went out of existence because those who put the law into effect agreed that they could not even define what an assault rifle, assault weapon was. Again, I have a squirrel gun that looks like something Arnold Schwarzenegger would use in a new movie, but it's for hunting squirrels and whatever. Okay, but it depends. My heart stand says I'm with you on that in a sense, but at the same time, defining what is and what is not. And remember, law is negative in a sense. If the law defines this implement as an assault weapon, that means the other weapons that can be used are not so defined. They can be used and not covered by the law. Then, I mean, it's a tricky wicket.
What something looks like, it makes no consequence. But the question is, that squirrel gun that you have that looks like something out of the Terminator, does it kill the squirrel or does it vaporize the creature? If it vaporizes the creature, then what's the purpose? And how much the more so when that weapon is aimed at and used on a human being, one of us, creatures created in the image and likeness of God.
But again, language is difficult and words are powerful. To say something that vaporizes, I would say there's not a single weapon that you would consider an assault weapon that vaporizes. Now, it destroys tremendous destruction on these things, yes. But again, I have deer rifles and shotguns, all that good stuff too. And a shotgun will vaporize more than what an so-called assault rifle will do. Again, it's sticky wicket. It's not an easy to deal with. And again, I don't want to get the impression I'm trying to defend guns, whatever. No, but it's something we need to look forward to. And I don't want to take up the time anymore. Just say we really need to look at it from a constitutional angle.
All right. Any other thoughts on guns? We'll move on quickly. We have a couple of minutes left. Here's a great local story. A Morehead State University satellite is part of the Artemis 1 payload, set to launch this month. As you know, Artemis is NASA's return to the moon program. The goal of the Morehead State Lunar Ice Cube is to find water. Panel, are you waiting for and will you watch this Artemis mission, the space program?
Absolutely. It's looking toward a future, and so much a future that we cannot conceive of that would be hopefully a good future.
And another positive for Kentucky. Kentucky always needs all the positive news media it can get.
I'm an alma mater is Morehead. My alma mater here in Kentucky is Morehead State University. So it shows that good things can come in small packages.
All right, fantastic. Corrie, any other thoughts? Are you going to watch the lunar mission?
I'm gonna try. I don't know. I won't make any promises, but I'll try.
All right. Thanks to our panel. That'll bring to a close this edition of Moral Side of the News. Thank you, Sally McClain, Daniel Corrie Shull, Stan Miles, and Tony Smith. If you'd like to watch this program again, just jump over to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. And of course, Moral Side is now a podcast. Just search for it wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, panel. Until next week, have a great week and thanks for your time.